Hello, welcome back. For this tutorial we are going to learn how to create a character that moves around in a maze as shown here on this example. You see he moves around in the maze, and what you may not be able to detect here is that he is aligned to a grid, so he can only stay on the grid here. If I can turn on a grid here and you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. He stays in this grid. If you notice his origin, which is that green X there, this green X is always on one of those red lines, whether it's a vertical or horizontal line. He is stuck to that grid. Okay, so we're going to learn to do that. So let me close this down real quick and we will get started here. So I've already started opening up my game here, and I've already got the sprites that I need for this. So you should already know how to create these left, right, up, and down sprites. If you don't, there is a video on my page that will demonstrate how to do this. So if you have not done this yet, please do so. If you don't know how, go watch the video to show how to do that. In addition to those, you need a little block sprite, just something square. You can get it from the internet, anything like that. It should be square. If it's not, it's not. We will ultimately make it square. So just be aware of that. So if you have not done that yet, please pause the video and go and take care of that. Get it set up so as we see up here with again our 4 directional sprites and another sprite that we're going to use for our walls of our room. Okay. All right, we're back. If again, you should have all of these sprites set up, and we're going to go ahead and get started. And the first thing we're going to do is we've got to change these sprites here so that they can be used in the type of game that we need. First of all, we've got to take our sprites here for our characters and make them square. So there's a couple different ways to do that. One of them is by you click over here to edit image, and up here you go to image and you go to resize all frames right here. Click that. This little window pops up, and what you're going to do in this case, we want to resize the canvas. We don't want to stretch this guy. If we were going to stretch him, we would use this one. We want to resize the canvas so it's square, and the canvas is this rectangular box that our character is sitting in. So you want to look at his width and height right here, and again click resize canvas here if you haven't already. Look at his width and height. Find the larger of the two. Typically it'll be the height will be larger in these cases, but sometimes they're the same. Sometimes it's a little bit wider than it is tall, but whichever one of these two is the largest, that's the number you want to use. So you want to click the other one, change it to 40. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me clarify something. Make sure this is unchecked. Make sure maintain aspect ratio is unchecked. So change that to 48. Or in my case, it's 48. In yours, it may be different. Just depend on the sprite that you use. So again, both these should be the same. Once you do that, you click apply, and you look what has happened here. You see now our canvas is a square. So you can go ahead and close that sprite, and if you look at the little sprite, the properties window here, you'll see it's 48 and 48 here. So we have to repeat this process for all the others. Now it's a slightly different way we're going to do it this time. Instead of going to edit image, we're just going to simply press this button right here. Click that, and you see the same window pops up, and you can do it there too as well. So we just resize canvas, 48 and 48. Make sure these are both the same, whichever was the larger, and it should be whatever the first one was, these all should be the same thing. If you want to click that center button right there just to make sure that it's centered, you do that, and you see it shrunk down here. If you just click this button right here, it'll enlarge back up so you can see the whole thing. Just repeat that for the last two. I'm going to do it kind of quickly. Again, if I'm ever going too fast, just feel free to pause the video. Apply, okay, and then again I enlarge that so I can see it. And last one here, same thing, 48, and apply. Now the other thing you want to do is on all 4 of these, check to see that the origin is in the top left. Okay, so I'm going to check left. Yep. Top left. Okay, right. Yep, top left. Up, top left, and down, top left. Okay, now remember this number right here, which either one of these, it should be the same. In my case it's 48, yours may be different. So, and then you go to the sprite for the wall that you should have imported already. And you're going to click the same button here again. But this time, instead of resizing the canvas, we are going to scale the image. We're going to make this image 48 by 48. Now, if these are the same right now, if they're both the same thing right now, you can leave this maintain aspect ratio checked. If not, you can unclick it. If you unclick it, it really doesn't matter, because you can, all it means is you just have to change both of it. If you notice when I click it here, if I go 57 and then hit enter, they both go to 57, or they both change the same amount, the same percentage. So with it's unchecked, all I got to do is just type in the numbers manually like this. So these two should be the same. So to make that happen, and what I would do too before you click apply here is this interpolation here. If you wanted to make it look a little nicer, click linear here, and it will make you a kind of a smoother looking block here. It'd be a little, it looks just a little bit nicer. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this sprite now. Yeah, I'm jumping ahead of myself here. Alright, so now what we want to do is we want to create two objects now. Now you might notice I have an object here. This is something that we're going to use, that I'm going to use later on. You're not going to create this object. This is just something for me for demonstration. So I'm going to right click, go to object, create, and I'm going to create the object for the night. So I'm going to zoom in. Remember your naming, the rules about naming conventions. Just be consistent. There you go, night. And then again, I'm using that naming convention because it's very similar to the one I use for the sprites. And I'm going to click the down sprite so he's facing me when the game starts. Okay. And then I'm going to close, and I'm going to go and I'm going to create another object. We're going to go back to that guy and program it, but right now I'm going to create another object here. Go create, and then this one we're going to call object wall, or again, you can call it whatever you want. And we're going to set that sprite. Now what we have to do with this one here is we have to make sure it is solid, okay, because we don't want our guy walking through it. Okay, go ahead and close this. We're not going to do anything else to that wall object yet. Now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to set up our room. We're going to draw our castle and our walls in our room here. Now, without changing anything, I'm going to start drawing a wall, and you're going to see a problem right away here. And again, if yours ends up the right size, you may not have this problem, but if you do, this is how you solve it. I've clicked the object wall here, and holding the Alt key down, I can now draw my walls here. Let me undo here because, yep, okay. Let me get these back down to the default settings here. Okay, yours probably says 32 by 32 here, okay. And the only reason mine said 48 is because I've run through this tutorial once before, and that's what it was set to. All right, so let me go back here. So if the default setting is 32 by 32, then it will cause problems here. Excuse me, I'm changing something back to the way it was before I started the game here, before I went through this tutorial. Alright, so for object wall here, I select object wall and I hold the Alt key down, and you see when I try and draw them, they do not stick together here. Okay, they're separated apart from each other, and that's the reason. These are 48 by 48 pixels, and our grid is 32 by 32. So the way you fix that is you go up here to where you guys saw just a second ago. You click here and you change your grid size to whatever the size of your sprites were. Again, mine were 48. If yours were 50, that's what you would put. they were 64, whatever it is that they are, that's the number you want to put. That's your magic number for the project here. So I'm going to go ahead and erase all these, and again, to erase these, you hold the Shift key down and just click and drag a window around all of them and hit delete. So now with that wall selected, again, now I can go through and I can, holding the Alt key down, I can draw, typically what I'll do is I'll draw a border around this. And you'll notice I can't go to the edge over here. See, if I go to the, see, I'm missing, I've got a little bit of border over here. We're going to deal with that in a second here. Now before I go and design the whole room, actually I'm going to do that now. I'm going to pause right now and I'm going to create, just draw up a room real quick. Just pause yourself and just draw the room around. If you want to wait for a second, you can kind of see what I'm looking at. You don't have to make it the same way, but just hold on for 1 second. Okay, as you can see, I've created the room, just a series of walls. You don't have to make yours exactly like mine at all. Just get the walls arranged here. Now if you notice on the edge over here, you see I've got some extra space here. So I can change the size of my room to get that to be even here. So what I do is I just simply count how many blocks, complete blocks I've got. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. And I know my blocks are 48 pixels wide. So if I get my calculator out, or 48, I'm sorry. So I go 21 times 48. And that gives me 1008. So I know that's how wide I need to make my room. So if I go back to my board here, and then you see over here on properties over here, you can see there's the width. If I change that to 1003, was that my number? No, 1008, sorry. Then this will perfectly fit. Now if you do not see this properties over here, click up here at room and find room properties. That should open up this window. So I'm going to change this to 1008. See, now you see that the room fits perfectly. Now vertically it looks okay, but we're just going to double check it mathematically. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And it's again 16 times 48. So I'm going to look and go 16 times 48 equals 768. And if I look at my height, yep, I'm good. 768 happens to fit perfectly. So again, if you need to change yours, do that at this time. I'll give you a couple seconds here, or if you need to pause the video, that would be best. Okay, and then I'm going to stick the guy in the room. I'm just going to stick one copy of him in the room here, and I'll quickly play it just so you can see that he's just going to be standing there, and it looks like he's dancing here. See, there he goes. Okay, so now we got to get him to move. All right, so first thing we're going to do is in his create events, we're going to remember when the game starts, we want him to not move like that, so we need to create a create event. So go over here, double click on object night, and again that's our event. I'm going to open this stuff up here so I've got a little more room to work with. So again, when the game starts or when he is first created, so you click add event, create, we are going to set his animation speed so he does not cycle through his sub-images. Again, it's over in the instances section, this one here, the guy chasing after the two triangles, that set animation speed. We're going to set that to 0. Okay. Now we're going to create a couple of variables here that we're going to use to control how he moves in the game. This makes it a little bit easier later on to do that. So we're going to set variable. I'm going to set 3 of different ones here. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly drag 3 of them in here, and then we'll fill them in here. I'll zoom in here so you can kind of see what I'm typing. So the first one is going to be SPD. Again, this is we did this in a couple other tutorials. This is just going to represent the speed we want him to go when he's moving. Okay, it doesn't actually set his speed, it just tells you this is the value we want it to be. Now this, you've got to do a little more math here for the speed here. The speed, in order to keep him so that he can line up the grid, your number here has to be a factor of your grid size. So your if your grid size, like mine, is 48, then the factors are basically any number that divides evenly into 48. So 1, 2, 4, 6, I believe, 8, I think, 12, 24, those numbers. So now some of them are obviously way too fast. So if we look down to you want about 4 or 5 range is the number you want. So 4 is divisible, or 48 is divisible by 4, but it is not divisible by 5. So we are going to go and stick with, we're going to use 4 here. Now the next one is going to be for how fast his little legs flop around when he's walking. So this is we use this same word before, and again, you can, whatever you want to put here is fine. Both of these are user created variables that that you can make up the name. As long as you don't use something that's already being used by GameMaker, you will not have a problem. Okay, so I'm using AniSpeed, ANI-SPD. If you want to use that, so when we're later on we are working together, we can have the same spelling and there won't be any confusion. So I'm going to set this to 0.5. I want his legs to go at half speed, because at full speed sometimes he looks like he's flopping around a little bit too much. Now this last one, this is a new one. I'm going to call it grid, and what this is going to be is the size of our grid. And the size of our grid is simply whatever our sprites are. This wall sprite is 48 by 48, so that's the value I'm going to use. So I'm just going to make that 48. This is going to be used in some calculations to keep him lined up with the grid. Okay. So so we've got that. This is our create event. Again, set animation speed to 0. Assign variable SPD to 4, assign variable AniSpeed, ANI-SPD to 0.5, and assign variable grid to 48, or whatever grid size you have. Okay, now we're going to get him to move. And we start off with just setting a direction, setting a speed, changing a sprite, and then setting an animation speed. So again, we want this to happen when the left key is down. So we're going to use key down left. And if you decide to use AWSD, then for left you would use A. Key down letters A instead. Okay, so again, we're going to set direction, which is in the movement section, that guy right there. You want him to move left. We're going to set his speed, which is this guy, and we're setting his speed to SPD. And again, right now, for my game at least, that value is equal to 4. Then we're going to set his sprite, which is up on instance, in the instance section here. This is a Pac-Man looking thing. We want it to be the left facing sprite, which is the first one here. And we're going to set the frame. Frame is going to be 0 relative, and the reason for that is if we don't click relative here, it's going to, every step that left key is held down, it's going to want to go to frame 0. And we reviewed this before, but I want to go over it again. Frame 0 would be this guy right here. So if that key is held down, it'll send it to this subimage, which will make it look like he's sliding. We don't want that. So we set it to 0 relative. What this means, this will add 0 to whatever the subimage is. So if he is on subimage 3, come on. If he is on subimage 3, he will stay on subimage 3 because we'll add 0 to that. Okay, so that's what we do there. And then the last thing we want to set is animation speed. Let me close this. Set animation speed, which is again in the instances section. Right there, the little guy chasing the triangles. Drag that down. We want his animation speed to be AniSpeed, and again, we've set that value to be 0.5. So let me zoom in on this so you can kind of double check your work here. Direction fixed, left direction Then we got speed, or set speed to SPD, set sprite to the left sprite, and frame is 0 relative. Set animation speed to ani-speed. Okay. Now we're going to simply duplicate this for the other 4 directions so we can start testing our game here. So duplicate event. Again, to duplicate, you just click on the one you want to duplicate. And again, in this case, we want to duplicate the left key. And you right click and you go duplicate event. And then you pick key down right. Again, if you're using the letters WASD, then you would go key down letters D in this case. Duplicate it again for up and down, which would be W and S if you're going to use the keys. Duplicate event, key down, up, and duplicate it again one more time. Key down, down. Okay. So then we got to go through and just double check we got to change what we need to change here. So up, obviously the direction is going to change to up, and our sprite is going to change to up. And again, that's the only 2 things we really need to change in all of them. So for the right, change it to right, change this guy to the right facing sprite. For down, you click down, change this. Now again, you can slide this slider here so you can see these a little bit better. Here's our down guy. So we click that. So now, if we play our game, you will see that the guy will now move, the knight will now move left, right, up, and down. But he's going to go through the walls. That's because we have not told him not to. Okay, so we'll do that. So exit out of this. And again, if I'm going too fast, please just pause until you get caught up, and then continue. All right. So again, we want him to stop when he hits a wall. Okay. So we're going to do that. We're going to click Add Event, and we're going to go Collision with the wall. So when he collides with the wall, we are going to want him to stop, basically. So all we're going to do is set his speed to 0. And we'll go down to movement here, just so you don't remember where they are. Movement, set speed to 0. We're going to set his animation speed, which is in the instances section here. There we go. Set animation speed. We're going to set it to 0, so he'll stop walking, or his instance will stop walking. And then, since we don't know which direction we're heading when we hit the block, we can't use this. We can't use the set sprite and set this to 0 because we don't know which one of these we want. The only thing we want to do is set the frame. We can't do it here, so don't use that one. You're going to use this set instance variable. Drag that into place. The variable we are changing that controls the frame that the character is on is called image index. So this should say image index, and it should say 0 relative. So now if we play the game, whenever he hits a wall, he will stop and go to the first sub image so that his legs are together. So you see he walks in there, and there we go. Okay. All right. Now, one other thing that you will have to do, now again, I've already run this, so run through this tutorial, so some of the changes I made I have to unmake here so I can show you what you need to do. Now, what ends up happening here is, see, he gets stuck here and he can't go through hallways unless he is perfectly lined up. So we got to do a few things to make it so that he can get through these hallways here. So one thing we need to do is we got to make a little adjustment to his sprites. So I'm going to go ahead and open his sprites here, and you're going to open up collision mask right here on the left side here. Now yours is probably set to automatic like this. Mine was again set to the setting we need because I had run through this tutorial already once before. So you see, this is what the computer sees. We need to get him so that he stays lined up with the grid, and this is one of the methods we do here. Instead of making the computer just see this, we're going to make it so the computer sees this entire block as this character. So if you go over here to mode right here, you click the little side thing here and go full image, and you see the whole thing turns gray now. Now the computer will see that. Now, be careful not to click down over here while you're working on this, because you'll end up undoing the origin. See, if I click over here, then my origin gets mixed up. So before you exit, make sure this says top left again. Okay. So you're going to repeat that process for all the other ones. So if you click on preview mask on all these, again, you just go to collision mask and you set it to full image. All of them should say full image. Okay. Go quickly through and just make sure that they're all that way. Collision mask, full image. Last one, collision mask, full image. Okay. All right. So now this does not completely solve our problem. We need to get him so that he will stay lined up to the grid. If I play right now, and I'm going to show you this new other object I made here, what its purpose is to show you the grid on the screen. So you see he walks around, but if I turn the grid on, hold on for 1 second, please. All right, now I've got it set here. All right, I've got an error here. Let me fix this real quick. All right, got my problem fixed. As you see, when he walks around here, even with that done here, he'll still get stuck, and the reason being is, again, you'll see he doesn't stay stuck to that grid. So the next step will get him to stay aligned to that grid so that his origin will always be on one of those red lines. Okay. All right, now to do that, we are going to make some conditions for him to move. In order for him to move, he has to be aligned to the grid. So that's our next step here. So I'm going to go to the key down left. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here so you can see a little bit better what we're doing here. This time we're going to use if an expression equals something. And what we're going to do is we're going to drag this guy right above here. And then we're going to take all of these that are in this line right here, we're going to move them to the side over here. So these will only run if whatever expression we put here is true. Okay. So the expression that we're going to put here, let me open this up a little bit and zoom in here and make this a little bit wider here so you can see the whole thing. The expression we're going to use, this is part of GameMaker programming language, is we're going to test to see if we are aligned to a particular grid. So the expression is place snapped, snapped, and then in parentheses you put, basically you're going to put the size of your grid. Now when we're moving left and right, we don't really care where he is on the x-axis. We only what we want to do is we only want to be able to move left and right if he's on one of the vertical axis. If he's on one of the, if he is touching one of the if he's touching one of the horizontal lines. If I play the game, this might I can't run it right now. It'll give me an error. So we don't care where it is along the x-axis. We just care about where it is on the up and down axis, on the y-axis. So for the x value here, we're going to put 0 and then comma. And then we're going to put the word grid. And the reason we're using the word grid is because that is in our create event what we set as our grid value. Our grid is 48 by 48, so that's what we're going to use. So what this means, if this guy, if he is basically anywhere on the x-axis, but he is aligned with the grid, he is in some multiple of 48, so 0, 48, 96, so on and so on. This means he's aligned to the vertical grid. So if he is aligned to the vertical grid, then he can change direction, and he can we can set his speed, change his sprite, and change his animation speed. Okay. So what we have to do now is we have to copy this. Now we can't just copy this because it'll copy all of this other program. We don't want this whole thing. We just want this code right here. So I'm going to highlight this and go Control C, and that's going to copy it. No, it doesn't let you right click like some programs do. So I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to Control C again, and then I'm going to go to write. I'm going to do write first because it's almost exact same program, and I'm going to drag the same thing in, if expression, drag that in, and I've got to, just like on the other one, I've got to drag all of these so that they're in line on the left side here. Okay, and then I'm going to go in, zoom in here, and I'm going to change this variable to what I've got in the clipboard. I'm going to paste it, so Control V, V is in Victor, and it's the same code. Place snapped 0, comma grid. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. If we're going left or right, it doesn't matter where we are on the X. We still want to go right. What matters is, are we at the right vertical position? And it'll only work if he's in the right vertical position. So let's go to up. I'm going to do the same thing here. Let me zoom out. Add a if expression. Take it to the top. Again, drag all these to the side. And on this case, we still have it in the clipboard here. So I'm going to paste this again, Control V. But this time, since I'm going up and down, I do care where I am on the x-axis. I don't care where I am on the y-axis. I don't care where I am vertically. I care where I am horizontally, because I want to be aligned up with my grid if I want to be able to move up or down. So I'm going to switch these. Instead of 0, comma grid, it's now going to be grid, comma 0. Like that. And I'm going to recopy this because I'm going to use the same one for down. So copy, go to down, again same thing, drag if expression, and start putting these all one under another. Oh, there we go. And we're going to paste the same thing that was in up is going to go in down. Place snapped, and then in parentheses, these are regular parentheses, not the square ones, grid, comma 0. Okay. Now when we play the game, you see if I want to move to the left or right, he will only move once I'm aligned to the grid. Now I'm going to turn on the grid so you can kind of see it a little bit better. See, now he sticks on the grid. So if I go down this area here, it moves very easy through here because he always is lined up with the grid. Okay. All right. Now the next thing you might notice is, you notice he does not stop in hallways. So you might want to get him so that he will stop in a hallway. And if you make a game like Pac-Man, if you make some kind of copy of Pac-Man, if you remember, or if you've ever played it, he can't stop in a hallway. In order to keep from going too far, the player has to, hit the left and right arrow keys to keep him still. So with the next bit of code we're going to put in is to get it so that he can stop in the middle of a hallway, and he'll stop aligned to a grid. Okay. So where we're going to do that is in it's going to be in an event called begin step. So at the beginning of every step, it's going to check for your player's position, and if nothing else is happening, it will stop him. So again, we're going to check for an expression here, and we're going to use the same one we used before, but this time we do care about its X position and Y position, because we want this to work either way. So instead of going 0 grid or grid 0, it's going to be grid grid here. Place snapped, open parenthesis, grid grid. Now it's going to check that it's aligned in both directions. Okay. If that is true, then what we want to happen is we want him to stop, and we want his animation speed to stop. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to add that right here. Where's movement? Down here. Set speed. I'm going to put set speed right here. We want to set his speed to 0, and we want to set his animation speed to 0 as well. There we go. Okay. Let me set that to 0 too. So now when he will stop in the middle of the grid, and his animation will stop as well. So you'll see this. So as he's moving, he'll continue to move until he's lined up with the grid, and then he'll stop. Okay, so if we turn the grid on here, see. Now it's a little bit hard to tell when, okay, so if I go like right here, see, he stops in the grid and he always stops. Now, we do have an issue with his little legs are spread apart sometimes, and they're not lined up like they should be. Again, most people when they stop walking don't stop with their legs apart like that. So we are going to we're going to do another little extra thing here that to make it so that his legs come together when he stops. So in this same area here, and we have to put it in kind of a weird place because you see here we get him to stop, and if we put what I'm going to put here after this, then his legs will skip to the first sub image every time he hits a grid line, and so we don't want that to happen. We only want it to happen. We only want his legs to stop moving if his speed is 0. So you see his speed is 0, turns to 0 here. So this happens every time. But if you're holding down another key, he will have a speed. So we want to, before we turn the speed off, we want to check to see if his speed is already 0. If his speed is already 0, we're going to set his image index to that. So this is going to take a little bit of shuffling around. So we're going to go over here to if variable right here. We're going to drag this to the side here, and you see that kind of throws everything out of order here. So we gotta drag these below this one. So, and again at the bottom of it, not at the top of it, or not to the side of it, I mean. So if his speed, if his grid is stopped, or if he's lined up with the grid, and his speed here, now we're going to actually use the word speed because we're checking his actual speed. If his speed is equal to 0, so if he is stopped, then we want to set his image index, which is this guy right here, set instance variable. Drag that to the side right there, and you see it shoots off to the side there. And we're gonna what we want to check is his image index. That's his sub image, his frame, and we want that to be 0. So now the way you read this, and this happens after a couple passes. So if you let go of a key, let me spread this out a little bit so we can get the most real estate out of here as we can see, and we'll go through this. All right. So what happens is every step it checks to say, okay, if you're not pressing any other keys, and say this character is moving to the left, then what will happen is every step it'll check, okay, is that person snapped to a grid? Is he lined up with a grid? If he is, then it's going to check if his speed is 0. Now, when he first gets there, his speed will not be 0 because he's moving. So it ignores this part and goes down here, and then now this is what stops him. He will stop. His direction will be his speed will be 0, and his animation speed will be 0. Then the next step around, provided nobody's pressed an arrow key or anything, it runs through this again. So if he is still locked onto place, which he will be because he was stopped in the previous step, then his speed is now 0. So if his speed is 0, then it changes his image index to the first frame. So now when we play it, you'll see whenever he stops, his legs are always together. And you'll see sometimes it even skips a little bit so it gets over there. Okay. All right. Now the last bit I want to do here is to make, like in a Pac-Man game, if you ever played Pac-Man, you know that there's holes in the side here that if he goes out one side, he comes around to the other side. So that's the next thing we're going to do to add to this. So first thing I want to do is let's open up that room again, and I'm going to simply just click on one square on each side here. So I'm going to take one out here. So again, you just click on it, hit the delete key, up at the top, hit delete, down to the bottom. Now you want to make sure these are lined up. So that one needs to be lined up there, that one needs to be lined up there. If you don't do this, then he hits his wall on the outside of the room and you don't ever see him again. Okay. Alright, so we've done that, and then we're going to go back to the night object, and then we're going to now program this so that if he goes off the screen one side, he will come back to the other side. Now, we've done this before. We've used the outside room event and used the wrap screen, but it's in this version of GameMaker, that setup doesn't work as well as it should have, as consistently as it should. So we're going to use a slightly more complex program that will work all the time. So I'm going to add an event, and we're going to check. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to check our character's position every step of the game. So I go add event, step. Okay, let me zoom out here and kind of shrink this down a little bit so I can see more. And move this off to the side. Okay, give myself more room here. Alright, so here we go. Alright, so what we're going to do in this step event, we are going to check our X position, our horizontal position, where we are left to right. So we're going to use this guy, if variable. Drag that in. The variable we were checking is our X value. Okay, and we're going to see if he is less, if his X value is less than 0 minus grid. And the reason I'm doing that is because his origin is on the left side of his body, and 0 is on the left side of the screen. So if his origin hits 0, you can still see his body completely in the room. So we have to wait till his body is completely 32 and 32, or whatever the grid size is. I think 48 for my game. Whatever the grid size is, we've got to wait till he's that far out of the room before we want him to jump to the other side. So that's what grid means in this case. That equals 48 in my game. In your game it may be different. So if his X variable is less than 0 minus grid, which means he is completely off the screen, then we want him to jump to the other side of the screen. But all we really want to do is we want to add the room width to his position. So I'm going to click here, and we're going to set variable here, and the position we want him to be, what we're changing again, if his X is less than he's off the left side of the screen, then we want to move his X to the other side of the screen. So again, the variable we're changing is X, and the new value we're going to set here is room width. Okay, room width is just a variable that tells you how wide your room is. So in our case, I think my room is 1008 pixels wide, so room width equals 1008. Now, since his origin is on the left side of his body, if we move that origin all the way to the right side of the screen, again, I'm kind of using this to represent the room. If his X position is all the way on the right side of the screen, his body will be off the screen over here somewhere. So now I'll demonstrate that again when we get to it. So now we've got this one set up. So now I'm going to do the opposite, basically. I'm going to take this, and again, if I select this one right here and go Control C, that copies it. And then click down below here and go Control V, again as in Victor. Then you'll see it just duplicates it. Now this time we're going to do the opposite. We're going to check to see if X is greater than. Now this time we're just going to reverse these two. Instead of, we're going to put room width here and 0 minus grid here. So I'm going to go, if my value is greater than room width, then make my X value 0 minus grid. Okay, and that's gonna that's going to make it work in the other direction. So I'm going to paste it one more time here. I'm going to copy this one again. Go to the bottom, paste it, and you'll see now this time we're going to deal with Y, and it's going to be basically the same thing. We're going to check our Y variable, okay, and we're going to see if it's less than 0 minus grid. Since the origin is above him, if his origin is right at the top of the screen, he is still completely visible. So we want to go 0 minus grid. That puts him one grid space out of the room. And if he is that, then we want to change his Y to room height. Now, in the past, people have had problems spelling height. H-E-I-G-H-T. So make sure you spell that right. And make sure it's an underscore. It's got to be spelled exactly this way. Okay. Okay. So now, again, just like we did with X, how we did going off the left side, then the right side, we're going to do the same thing here. We've gone off. This is dealing with the top. Now we're going to copy this. So just copy and then paste down here, and we're going to do we're going to reverse it again. We're going to go greater than room height, and then if it is greater than room height, we're going to change the Y value to 0 minus grid. Okay. Now once we've done this, now we should be able to test this. And see if it works. And let me move my cursor out of the way here. And you see we get him to the top of the room, and there he appears at the bottom. Okay, now let me turn on the grid so you can kind of see what I was talking about with the origins. See that green cross is his origin. So if he's right, if his origin is at 0, he is still completely visible in the room. You can see him right there. Okay. So that's why we have to move him. We have to wait until he's completely out of the room, which is one more grid space across, and then that makes him jump to, you see right there, see he is at room height right there, and you can see it's sticking through a little bit there. So if we back up, if he gets more than that, then he jumps to the other side. Same with the top. His origin's up at the top, and he moves. See, he's still completely in the room when his origin's at 0 for Y. And then so we just bring it up here, and you see it. You'll see it pop up there. Okay. All right. So that is it for this tutorial. Thank you for your patience. I know this is a long one, but thank you for sticking with it. If you have any problems, if there's anything you ever don't understand in any of these videos, please let me know in class so that I can help you out. Okay.